Can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So, you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in future. When I first heard this quote by Steve Jobs, it got me thinking. I started reflecting upon my own life choices and decisions that I'd made, which for some reason had started looking like Brownian motion, completely random and unpredictable. In fact, my friends who have noticed the unconventional twists and turns that my life has taken have often wondered and asked, hey, are you directionally challenged? And honestly, I think they're right. It is hard to accept it, but I do believe that I'm a directionally challenged person, both literally and figuratively. In fact, when I visit towns outside of my hometown, to places that I've been to many, many times before, I still invariably get lost trying to navigate the roads. And no amount of GPS maps or tourist guides can help me beyond a point. So I do what most men wouldn't, except that I am lost and ask for directions. But having said that, this inability to find directions has unfortunately permeated into more critical facets of my life. Decision making, for example. As a youngster, and like most teenagers, I found it very difficult to decide between engineering or medicine as a career option. And from where I come from, these were the two dominant, commercially viable and acceptable career options those days. Dr. Amit Shah. Now that sounded just too cool. So I set off to enroll into one of the best medical schools in the country, and as I sat there filling up my forms, a small voice in my head popped up and said, Amit, you've always been good at math and you love to build things. Are you sure you want to become a doctor? So there I was, dropping out of a medical school even before joining, and thank goodness for the patience. And I became an accidental engineer. In the heydays of late 90s and early 2000s, before the dot-com bust, almost every engineer, irrespective of his specialization, would end up taking an IT job, right? You might have as well taken up the job before studying. But I took up an IT job as well. And as I was about to join the company, the same small voice in my head popped up again. Said, Amit, you are a mechanical engineer? You love to build things? Are you sure you want to be doing coding all your life? No offense to the techies here, but I actually dropped out of the job and went on to join oil and gas sector instead, and actually loved it. So you see, this little voice in my head has always been at loggerheads with what is the norm of the day, and making it seem like I'm the confused guy. Anyways, you often meet people who are the complete opposite. They have complete clarity in mind, great focus, they know what to do with their life. I had this batchmate of mine who wanted to become a fixed income derivatives trader. He actually became one. And there are many others like him that you meet in your life. And I'm very, very envious of these guys, because the toughest question I get asked during interviews is nothing to do with the subject matter. But where do you see yourself 5 years down the line? I'm like, I never have a correct answer. All I have is an honest answer. And I tell them that, look, I would like to do something new, something interesting, something different every 2 to 3 years. But as far as interviews go, honest answers are not the best answers. So resultantly, I've had a fairly checkered career, starting with oil and gas, FMCG, strategy consulting for a while, and finally stumbling into banking. And within banking as well, I've been fortunate enough to do different things every few years. But, you know, this whole directionally challenged thing is not as uncommon. I'm not a unique guy. A recent survey conducted amongst 4,000 class 12 students revealed, shockingly so, that 40% of them had no clue what they wanted to do after their board exams. A significant proportion of the balance said we were open. We would decide basis the performance in our class 12 exams. And only about 1 in 3 of them was actually sure what she or he wanted to do next. So, if you are as directionally challenged as me, if you do not know where you want to be 5, 10, or for that matter 3 years down the line, I would like to share with you 3 life hacks. These are things that I picked up through my own life experiences, and because I usually do not know what my destination looks like, I've learned to enjoy the journey better through these life hacks. Life hack 1. Find your captain. As a young engineer at the age of 22, I got to spend a few months in a once in a lifetime, money can't buy you kind of an opportunity on a small beautiful island called Songo Songo. Songo Songo was located on the east coast of Africa, near Tanzania. There I met Captain Miguel Esposito. He was unlike anybody I had ever met. Introducing, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Miguel Esposito. An Italian by birth, he had settled in Africa and over a period of 3 decades built one of the most successful and the largest shipping businesses in the country. His company was hired by our company to help us build a subsea pipeline and a gas plant on Songo Songo. And you know, when you work in an ocean on a ship, there's a lot of free time at hand between work shifts. And with the company of somebody like Captain, you end up talking. You know, we would talk about his days on the ship and how we built his business, about passions, about philosophy and everything else. During one such conversation, I happened to mention to Captain that I would love to swim in the azure blue waters of Songo Songo before I went back to India. But the only small hitch was that I had never ventured beyond, let's say, 4 feet of water, even in a swimming pool. Captain being captain, one fine morning, when the ocean was like calm and still as a mirror, he practically yanked me out of my bed on the ship, put me onto a small boat, and took me deep into the ocean. And said, jump. I was like, and Captain looked at my hesitant and petrified face and said, don't you want to learn to swim? I said, yes, Captain, I also want to live, right? So, now Captain speaks in his chaste Italian English and says, look at this life buoy. I will throw it at you if you are in trouble. And if you are in deeper trouble, I will jump in myself to save you. But I am a captain of a ship and I don't let my crew down. You have to trust me on this one. That day, I literally took a leap of faith and I jumped into the water. Thinking about it, it was plain stupid. It was potentially the adrenaline rush that comes with youth, but I actually learned to swim. And that key experience also taught me 2 facets of life. One, if you want something and you want it really bad, you will need to take that plunge. You will need to take that leap of faith. Face your fears, face the unknown, and challenge your self-beliefs. And when in the deep end, you cannot let negative thoughts of failure enter your mind. Number 2, and this is the important one, don't ever try and stunt without expert supervision. What I mean to say is, it helps to have a captain by your side. A captain is a mentor at workplace. A mentor that you can trust. A mentor that you know will lend a helping hand at you in case of trouble, and if push comes to shove, will jump in himself to save you. None of us can be as fortunate as Arjuna to have Krishna by our side. But Eklavya also found a mentor. I have been fortunate enough to find great mentors at every stage of my life. And if you are as directionally challenged as I am, please go find a mentor. For all you know, your mentor is somewhere around you. You only have to look out for him. Moving on. I call this destiny. One often finds his destiny on the very road he chooses to avoid it. Master Ugwe delivered these pearls of wisdom to Shifu in the iconic movie Kung Fu Panda. But the question that I really want you to think about is, how open would you be to evaluating opportunities that you know will take you far away from the ideal future that you have envisaged for yourself? Essentially, would you be flexible enough to modify or completely junk the ideal future state of your career just because something interesting and something exciting came along? Now, these questions are as applicable to our personal lives as to our professional lives, because all of us have this notion of what we want to do and where we want to go. When I was studying in MBA, FMCG jobs were in vogue. And on day zero of campus, I got not one, not two, but all of 6 FMCG jobs. Obviously, it was peer pressure and my own insecurities that I went through so many processes. But just as I was about to sign on to one of those offers, eventually you can only take a job, the same little voice in my head pops up again and says, are you sure you want to be doing this? Isn't it peer pressure? I don't think you want to do FMCG job. By now you must have realized that this little voice in my head is like the police in Indian Bollywood movies, always arrives at the crime scene after all the damage has been done. But directionally challenged as I was, I did not know what I wanted to do. I only knew what I did not want to do. And I did not want to do banking. I had never studied anything that was vaguely related to banking during the 2 years of MBA. Naturally, I did not know much about what banks do, and I did not sit through even a single banking interview. So, essentially, banking was not part of my preconceived future career path. But when this opportunity came along to join a young, new age private sector bank, which was in those days a startup kind of a bank, with the promise that I will be allowed to build the organization bottoms up, I said, hey, this is just too challenging and exciting to let go of, right? And they are also willing to offer me a job, so what try? So I took up that job, and now I've spent close to a decade in this sector, and only with one bank. And like our directionally challenged Kung Fu Panda, I think I also found my destiny on the very road that I took to avoid it. The last decade has not been an easy one for us bankers. We saw the Bear Stearns go down, the Lehman Brothers collapse, the great global financial crisis, the Eurozone crisis, the Indian crisis 1, the Indian crisis 2, and most recently, the sleepless hours and nights that you have spent on back of the demonetization drive, which, by the way, is a very bold and a progressive reform, but nonetheless, easy to summarize that the last decade has been a decade of banking crisis. More so to people like me, who work for the fastest growing bank, which is highly differentiated and fairly aggressive, the going has been, for the lack of a better word, very exciting. You can well imagine that during this reasonably long tenure, there have been many, many moments that haven't gone too well. Rather, they have gone bad. And what happens when things don't go too well or things go bad? Let's imagine you miss business targets. You get a bad appraisal. You miss that promotion you've been eyeing. You get pushed into a project which is like mind-numbing at best. You don't get along with your colleagues. Usually, the first thought that comes to your mind is, to hell with it, I'm out of here, right? I'm cut out for bigger things. I don't need to be here. Let me just get out of here. More recently, people are also saying, I will start up on my own. But these thoughts have also crossed my mind. And I've been through these moments myself, multiple times. I've spent sleepless nights and agonizing mornings just brooding about what do I do, how do I get out of this. But through these experiences, I have realized that particularly in moments of adversity, one needs to think slow. Take a deep breath. Don't jump the gun. make any reactive decisions. We have to suppress the natural instincts, like humans, natural instincts are to fly for safety. Right? Every time something goes wrong, we want to fly to a comfort zone. But we need to suppress those instincts. Because all that is required in such moments is resilience to stay put and fight. Because quite often, the situation is not as bad as it originally seems. And almost every adversity has an inherent opportunity built into it. It's up to us to be able to spot that opportunity and to seize it. Of the many things that I've learned from my mentor and boss, Rana Kapoor, the most precious one has been how do you script your own story? How do you dream big and not shy away from pursuing what looks impossible? You know, Rana Kapoor was a professional like us who went on to become an entrepreneur and set up the best run private sector bank in less than a decade without institutional backing, beating all odds. So when I look at him and I look at many other entrepreneurs in India and globally who have set some brilliant enterprises, I wonder how is it that these individuals are able to visualize the future? How is it that these individuals are able to strategize the building blocks of bringing the future to the present? And most importantly, how is it that these individuals are able to motivate thousands of young professionals to rally behind them, to see the dreams through their eyes, and work passionately and assiduously to help achieve those visions? When I go and ask Rana Kapoor, he says, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Now I really hope that it is that easy. But directionally challenged or otherwise, nothing stops us from scripting our own stories. Nothing stops us from dreaming those dreams. Nothing stops us from taking our chances and making those decisions. Either as an accidental engineer, or as a doctor, or as a stumbling, bumbling banker. At first, some of these may not make any sense. But as Steve Jobs said, the dots will certainly connect when you look back in the past, in the future. Thank you.